Kim, we have women in our groups from all different walks of life, different ages. In fact, we have 2 women in our group that are about to be married this summer, so that's exciting. And then we have some veterans in the group. And so I've fallen down the in-between myself. I'm no pro at this, but this is going to be my 10th wedding anniversary coming up in July. It's my first wedding, my first marriage, my husband's second. So I started doing this, just to give you a little background, I started doing this the year before my first anniversary. We had a bumpy start, and a lot of it had to do with finances, interesting. And I was just like, I don't know if this is for me. I mean, I have been single more years of my life than anything. I'm like, right. I don't know how to be a married woman. I'm like, I'm reading books and people are looking at me like I'm nuts. I'm like, I don't know how to do this. I'm used to knowing what to do. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your marriage, like how long you've been married, and just give us a little background on your faith walk and that kind of thing.
Okay. We could make this really long, but I'll make it as short as I can. So I actually met my husband when I was 11 years old. Some people think that's awesome. Some people think it's really scary. I didn't technically date at that time, but we liked each other. I'm going to say he liked me on and off. We had an on and off relationship for about 5 years, but I ended up pregnant at 16 years old, delivered my daughter at 17. We got married right after I found out I was pregnant. Not what I recommend. However, God can redeem, and he has made a beautiful story out of our mess. And so the first 10 years of our marriage were pretty tumultuous. He wasn't really ready to be a father or husband. And I don't say that derogatory. It's just the facts. But God started working on him after, we had our second child. And 10 years into marriage, God just started making some changes. And I'm very thankful to say now, 33 years later, which is not the norm in our society. So it really is God's redemption in our marriage that we're still together. So
awesome.
Now, it was a process. I didn't do things perfectly, but I had a job to raise 2 kiddos. So God enabled me to do that without him walking alongside me through all of that. But thankfully, we both decided we were going to stick it out, and here we are. Now we have a daughter that's married and 4 grandchildren. And so really and truly, I don't even know the words to explain, except there's joy and there's hope for people whose marriages, 10 years out of 33, that was a third of the marriage was not what I would call pleasant. But the last 20 plus have been.
There's a refining process in it, though, Yeah. Those differences, the abrasions, it's kind of, we rub against each other and it polishes us in a way.
Yes, it does. And it grows us and it grows our faith. And truly, those years grew my faith probably as much or more than anything else that I've experienced. So having to depend on God that, okay, we're going to stay married. But this is not easy. This isn't always fun. How do we do this and make it work?
I told my husband, you only have one way out. You are with me for the rest of your life. He's like,
yes, that is correct.
Let's figure it out. I said, I'm only doing this once, so let's make it a good one.
That's right. And learning about your spouse and learning the differences between men and women. There's so much to learn, but praying for your spouse. When someone gave me a paper years ago on how to pray for your husband and how to pray for your children, It was eye-opening because nobody, in my growing up years and my teen years, nobody told me, well, this is what you need to do and this is how you do it.
Right. I mean, I think in some ways we're brought up that some things are just so natural that it doesn't have to be talked about. And we're like, really?
Right.
I mean, and now we're in that age of you learn how to do things. There's processes, there's technology. And so, there's got to be an app for that or something, right?
If I could just push the button.
Right, let me see. What does it say do now?
Yes, right.
Another thing, though, culturally, our family units don't stick in one spot like they used to either. And so, like they say, it takes a village. You used to have your village, you're down at the river doing the wash on the rocks or whatever, and everybody gets to talk to everybody and they got their sounding boards. And now it's like, okay, I got one kid on this coast, another kid in the Midwest. And, how do you establish those things? It's like you have to, well, Denise Mock mentioned when I interviewed her, she goes, you have to find your people to do life with, because we don't always have that security blanket of just our immediate family.
It's so true. So true.
What kind of recommendations can you give, ideas for saving and planning for the future? Things that are going to leave the legacy. I tell my husband, I don't come from a background where we're going to have this huge inheritance or anything like that, so I don't understand that side of life, he comes from more money and I'm like, what you see is what you get. So how do you build on that?
So there's two sides to that. And I could talk about this again for a long time. I'm going to try to make it concise, but really I feel like there's two parts. The legacy, first and foremost, of our Christian faith and passing that on. And I think that's the number one priority. And I just actually spoke at the NACWE conference on your reach is immeasurable. And to me, that's your legacy. And we have a praying, well, she's passed away now, but a praying grandma who prayed for 100 of us Smiths every single day.
Wow.
And it's a really neat story. And I think to myself, that's a different kind of legacy than just handing money, right?
Absolutely.
So we can be a legacy creator of character, of our Christian faith and passing that on. My 8-year-old granddaughter just got baptized recently. And to me, this grandma that was her great-great-grandma praying for our family, that's part of that legacy. And so we have the Christian heritage legacy that even if we didn't have it, we can be the one to start it and pass it on. And that's a huge, it's a gift and a responsibility, both. But on the money side, I think there's a piece to that of teaching our kids character and integrity and honesty and how to handle their money. Because the reality is, and let's just be real for a moment, most kids in the U.S. today, if they were handed $1 million because their parent died at 18 or 19 years old, they wouldn't know how to handle it.
No.
And so we want to be able to do those things. And I think most parents, if you ask them, would you want to leave your kids a lot of money? Most people would say yes. But I think part of that legacy piece is showing them, because they follow what we do, right? So modeling it to them and handling our own money wisely and in a godly way. But then teaching them so that 1,000 or it's 100 million or anything in between, we want our kids to be able to handle it well.
Yes.
And so one of those things is, I think, starting to teach your kids when they're little how to do those things. And that's like a whole fun topic of ways that you can do that when they're really young. And you particularly building it yourself. And it's something my husband and I have done over the years, but we've thought through the process and want to make sure. Now our son is 28, but I can tell you when he was 18, I wouldn't have wanted him to have gotten $1 million in his hands, because I think he would have had a lot of fun. And not because it would have been all bad things. He probably would have done some really cool things, but he would have come back 6 years later and probably gone, where did the money go?
Right.
And so teaching, but modeling, but also thinking through, our kids know that we have said 3% of what we have accumulated is going to go to 3 of our favorite ministries. And so they know that that's in our trust.
Right.
But picking up and saying, you know what, when my life ends, it's not over.
Right.
My life can live on in ways so far beyond me. And one of those ways is to fund the kingdom.
Right.
That legacy just goes on. So it can go on in my own family, but it can also go on, spread throughout Christian organizations and ministries that we continue to fund. So if we plan in our finances that it's not just for us to spend all here and now, and it's not just for our kids to have a great time after we die.
Right.
There's more to it than that, and looking beyond. So saving a portion of that, not hoarding, because I think we can go two opposite ends of the spectrum of that, spending every penny we make or more, or hoarding it and not really having open hands to God. And so having a balanced picture of that, and really seeking God on what does he want us to do that would last beyond us.
Absolutely. So, prayer is just such a key part of that, because we pray for, if we don't know how to do something, it says ask,
Yes.
And we have to be willing to ask those hard questions. It's like those things that make us uncomfortable, that, to talk about it. And I think so many times when we are with our Christian families, when you're with others, I think we tend to put on our church face, so to speak, and we want to act like everything's peachy, and like, okay, and
Right.
But really you've got all these underlying things going on. And I think it's important that we talk and do life together, that we ask each other, how do you handle this? How, because it may be a simple thing, but you just may have not looked at it that way. And sometimes you hear something from someone else and then it finally clicks and you're like, aha.
Yes.
Well, Kim, I appreciate your time so much today, and I'm sure this will be of value to the ladies. And I just thank you. And
thank you.
We just don't underestimate the power of praying together.
That is absolutely true. And he cares about every facet, whether it's our marriages, our money, our kids, our grandkids. Yes. Pray about all of it.
All of it. Absolutely.